Hi, boys and girls. Let's take a look at My Math Lesson 1.7, Comparing Decimals. Your objective: students will be able to compare decimals. If you have your My Math book, you can get that ready. And if you have your decimal place value chart, please have that ready as well. All right. In your My Math book, we're on page 51, Comparing Decimals, page 51. I want to show you a few examples of how to do this skill and have your decimal place value chart ready. Plot each decimal on the number line. Write less than, greater than, or equal to in each circle to make a true sentence. So one way to compare decimals is to use a number line. If you are provided with a number line, it makes things a lot easier. If you have to make your own number line and you're not really sure of your decimals and where they are in the number line, I would not suggest doing that. But we have number lines ready for us, so let's go ahead and use them. For number 3, we're comparing 4.4, which is red, 4 and 4/10. And we're comparing that to 4.1, or 4 and 1/10. So on our number line, you can see we are counting by 1/10 because each number, as we move to a line, it is 1/10 greater. So let's plot 4 and 4/10. And let's plot 4 and 1/10. As we move to the right on the number line, the value increases. The numbers are greater. So 4.4 is on the right of 4.1. That means 4 and 4/10 is greater than 4 and 1/10. And as I always say in class, remember that Pac-Man eats the greater number. So if we look at the problem, 4.4 is greater. So Pac-Man is going to eat 4 and 4/10. And I say it's Pac-Man because of the old video game with a guy that looked like that. He would eat little pellets, and sometimes there would be ghosts that would get him, and you don't want that to happen. So Pac-Man's hungry. He eats the greater value. 4.4, or 4 and 4/10, is greater than 4 and 1/10. Let's look at the next one. 37 hundredths compared with 39 hundredths. On my number line, I'm counting by 1/100th. So let's plot both of these. 37 hundredths and 39 hundredths. 39 hundredths is on the right side, which means it's greater. So for this one, Pac-Man needs to eat 0.39 because it's greater. So here comes Pac-Man. He eats the greater number. 57 hundredths compared with 65 hundredths. We're counting by 1/100th again. Here's 57 hundredths, and here is 65 hundredths. Whichever is to the right is greater. So 65 hundredths is greater. Pac-Man wants to eat the greater value. 57 hundredths is less than 65 hundredths. All right, now let's do some problems without a number line. And the strategy that we want to use is to line up your decimal points and stack your numbers. So what I mean by that, if we look at our two numbers, we want to rewrite them so that their decimal points are stacked on top of each other. So let's take our 2 and 15 hundredths, and then 2 and 150 thousandths. Now I said to have your number line ready. I want to show this to you on the number line, on your place value chart, sorry. 2 and 15 hundredths. Fits right in there. Our second number was 2 and 150 thousandths. So we see some similarities, but what I do notice is that our first number is only in the hundredths, and our second number goes up to the thousandths. In order to compare these, we want them to be in the same decimal place value. So we would like for both of them to be in the thousandths. And you can do that by annexing a 0. And that means that you can add a 0 to the right of any decimal value, and it doesn't change what it's worth. And when I do that, I can see that these are actually the same number. So we call that being equivalent or equal to. So when I annex my 0, I can see that they are equivalent. All right, let's look at number 7. 0.006 compared with 0.1. If I put them on my place value chart, 0.006 and 0.1. I can see that they are definitely not the same decimal place value. Our first number is 6 thousandths. Our second number is 1/10. We have thousandths and tenths, so we need to make them both as long as the longest one in the decimal section. So let's make them both thousandths. I can annex 2 zeros, so now the second number is in the thousandths. And let's compare. 6 thousandths, 100 thousandths. And I can show that to you right on here too if you didn't have your place value chart. It's important that you line things up and make it neat. 6 thousandths is less than 100 thousandths. So if Pac-Man is eating the greater value, we would put in that symbol because the 0.1 is actually greater. And this one can cause a lot of confusion because some people think that because this one's longer, it's greater, which is not always the case. And then some people will see a 6 and a 1 and just compare those digits. 6 is greater than 1, but not in this place value. So place value plays a huge part in determining if a number is greater than another number. All right, number 8. I'm going to stack my decimal points. And what I find is that these actually are both in the thousandths place. So I don't have to annex a 0, but I do need to compare. My ones place is the same, so that's not helpful. My tenths place is the same, and that's not helpful. My hundredths place has a difference. 5 is greater than 4, which means this first number is greater than the second number. Pac-Man eats the greater number. So 0 and 652 thousandths is greater than 0 and 647 thousandths. Number 9, stacking my decimal points. Make sure you're careful about your zeros. I can also put this one in a place value chart if I would like to. Can definitely be helpful. So I have 0 and 9 hundredths, and I have 0 and 1 thousandth. Okay, let's make our first number as long in the decimal section as the second number. So I want to annex a 0 so that both of my numbers are in the thousandths place. And now when I compare them, 90 thousandths and 1 thousandth. Well, 90 thousandths is definitely more than 1 thousandth. So Pac-Man is going to eat the greater value. Number 10, 7.31 compared with 7.304. Sorry, my dog's barking. I can see that my first number only is in the hundredths. My second is in the thousandths. So I'm going to annex a 0 and have them both be in the thousandths. My ones place They're both 7. My tenths are both a 3. So let's look at the hundredths. 1 is greater than 0. So my first number is greater than my second number. 7 and 31 hundredths is greater than 7 and 304 thousandths. Number 11. Pause the video, see if you can figure this one out. All right, let's take a look at it. This guy's in the thousandths, and this guy's only in the tenths, which means I need to annex 2 zeros. Did you figure out that they were equal to each other? These are equivalent or equal. Number 12, if you're getting the hang of decimal place value, you might be able to do this one in your head. If not, stack those decimals. They're both in the tenths place. So 5 tenths is less than 7 tenths. Pac-Man eats the greater value. Number 13, they did a little switcheroo. 0 and 62 hundredths and 0 and 26 hundredths. All right, so they reversed the numbers here. They're already the same place value, so let's compare. They both had a 0 and the 1, so we compare the hundredths. 6 is greater than 2, so our first number is greater than our second number. And last one, 3 and 7 tenths and 3 and 70 hundredths. What do we put in this little hole? A 0. We annex a 0 and we can see that they are equivalent. All right, I hope that helped you with comparing decimals. Remember that the place value chart is a good friend and it can really help you to understand decimals. That's it for now. Have a great day and I'll see you again soon.